This podcast is for informational purposes only. Personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and not legal advice, neither health, tax, nor professional, nor official statements by their organizations. Guest views may not be those of the host. Hello, and welcome to AI or Not, the podcast where business leaders from around the globe share wisdom and insights that are needed now to address issues and guide success in your artificial intelligence and digital transformation journey. My name is Pamela Isom, and I am your podcast host. We have a special guest with us today, Claus Thorp Jensen. Claus, you're a chairperson of the board, an independent director, and a board advisor. We met during my IBM days, and we've maintained contact, which is a good thing. We're both leaders in digital transformation. We're both future thinking architects. I love the fact that we both have that architectural thinking background. That's just very special to me. Claus, welcome to AI or Not.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
And tell me more about yourself, your career journey, and how you arrived where you are today. Tell me more.
Good question. Well, my career has been nonlinear. It spans 2 countries. I'm born and raised in Denmark, so I'm a first-generation immigrant, and 3 industries. So I started in finance. You finish your college degree, and you got to get a job. So I got into finance. I accidentally got into the C-suite when I was 32. So at 32, some of the higher-ups had been to a conference, and they'd heard about needing a chief architect. So I was the fixer for the organization, and I was called to the office. And I was like, "Hey, Claus, you need a favor. What do you need this time?" "You need to be now new chief architect." And I'm like, "What's that?" "We don't know, but that's your job. Go figure it out." Right? So in a very real fashion, my senior executive job started with, I have no idea. I'm going to go figure it out. And that's actually what I spent the last 25 years on, figure it out. So I figured out how to be a chief architect. I figured out how to lead large M&A and integration transaction and create the connective tissue between different organizations that hadn't worked together before. And at one point, around 2008, it was like, what's next? I'm not 40 yet. So it's like, what are we going to do next here? And next became the US. So moved from Denmark to the US and joined IBM, joined Big Blue and see the world. So lots of travel. I got to work with a lot of interesting organizations. And I had one of those jobs that weren't on the org chart. Now, I had a title and I was placed somewhere in the organization, but the real job was helping clients answer a very simple question. So we have all this technology. Now what?
Uh-huh.
And sort of in the spirit of figure it out, okay? Because it's like, go and help people figure out what's important to them from a business perspective. Figure it out. What are they going to do with all this technology? One of those clients was Aetna, one of the largest health insurers in the US. And they must have liked what they saw, because after one of the readouts I gave them, Meg McCarthy, the then CIO and COO, decided that she was going to hire me. And so I went from working for IBM to all of a sudden working in healthcare. So that's how I got into healthcare. Were acquired by CVS, got the CTO job for CVS Health. And most people would say, hey, you made it. You're a CTO of a Fortune 5 company. It's a great job. It was a great job. It is a great job. But when Memorial Sloan Kettering asked me, hey, do you want to help us cure cancer? How can you not say yes? If you're driven by purpose, and I am, then that was meaningful. So I joined an academic medical center, which is totally different. And my timing was impeccable because
And you had to figure it out.
I had to figure it out, yes. But I also had to figure out more stuff because I had great timing. And this was at the end of 2019. And we all know what happened in the spring of 2020.
Tell me.
The COVID-19 pandemic, and the epicenter of that was New York City, where I happened to be working. So the mayor gave us 2 days notice to send 40% of staff home and still run the hospital. So we figured it out because we had to figure out how you do that. And how do you manage the crisis, but at the same time also make progress on what you were trying to do, which is to make cancer care better. Post-pandemic, good place to say, hey, we made a lot of progress, and virtual care had become real. So I spent the last, a little less than 3 years working on how does virtual care become not something on the side, but a fundamental part of a longitudinal whole person approach to care, which brings us to today. So, a whole bunch of figure it out sort of experiences later, it turns out my career became that. It became, we are at A, we need to be at B. And my job became how to manage that journey from A to B. So I live in the intersection between business, technology, and people. And you know what? That's a great place to be for someone who started in Denmark with a technology degree.
That's fascinating. That's an interesting career journey. What I love, I'm a big fan of yours, but what I love the most in what you said is to figure it out. So I always tell my daughter and now my grandkids that there's nothing too hard, and that sometimes that's some of the best fuel when you don't understand something and you're challenged to go and come up with a resolution. It can be difficult in corporations because when they're putting things before you, you sometimes want them to tell you, well, what do you expect? Well, what do I do? But it can be of significant reward. So it's nice to hear that journey. So
What you learn along the way is there are techniques to figuring it out. I mean, you don't have to start from scratch, right? Because there are sort of techniques you've tried before they work. There are things that don't work. So sometimes I describe myself as a technologist turned storyteller.
Technologist turned storyteller. Okay.
If you're figuring out, you have to be really good at telling stories.
Uh-huh. You want to tell me more about that? Give me an example.
Sure. I can. So how about this? What's the difference between storytelling and telling stories?
One is based on truth and facts, and the other is fib.
No, I think the best stories are all true. But yeah, it could have been. I think storytelling is telling stories with a purpose.
Uh-huh.
Whereas telling stories is just telling stories. I mean, we tell stories all the time. Our brains are wired for stories. Here's a fact for you. It turns out that a story that resonates with you emotionally impacts how you think 22 times more powerfully than any amount of facts.
Okay.
That's been researched and allegedly at least proven, but there's no question that stories are powerful. So you get to this point where you're sitting in that, where if your sweet spot is between business and technology and people, there's a people component. And if your job is to move from A to B, how do you help shape that journey? It turns out that at some point in my career, I had to make a choice. It was actually why I worked for IBM, and it was another one of our colleagues, and we were out for dinner after a client meeting. And she tells me out of the blue, I think she still remembers, "Hey, Claus, you're being stupid."
Oh, no.
She did. And I'm like, what? Where did that come from? I thought we were friends, so why would you tell me that I'm being stupid? Yeah, you're just being stupid. Okay, cop it up. Why do you think I'm being stupid? Well, you just are. I mean, you tell people the whole truth. Yeah, that's my job. I mean, I'm the expert. You bring me in so I can tell people the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's what we do. Yeah, that's why you're being stupid. I was apparently not getting it, so I was being a little bit slow. And then she said, "But people respect you for all you know, but frankly, you scare them. So when you tell people the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, they totally get it. Then you know everything there is to know about this topic, but they don't want to talk to you again."
So that's why you storytell.
Bingo, because stories are not nearly as scary, right? And the point is, you have a choice to make. You can choose whether you show up as the expert and you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and you can be kind of scary and intense, or you tell the truth and nothing but the truth, but you don't always tell people everything you know. You tell them the story that they need to know.
That's right.
In context of their reality. So that is probably the most fundamental career choice you can make as a technologist. You have to choose. Do you want to be the expert or the storyteller? I chose the storyteller.
I like that. I use the approach, meet people where they are. So it's storytelling, but I don't call it that necessarily. But I take the time out to get to know and understand who going to be interfacing with, and then I deliberately and intentionally try to meet them where they are, because it's nothing worse than talking over people's heads or people can't relate to what you're saying. You just might as well forget about it. That's just a exercise in futility. And it's our job to understand how to connect and meet people where they are. So that's good. I like that. I like it. I like it.
And here's what's fascinating about it, right? Because to quote Henry Ford, allegedly early 1900s, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Right? So it's not just that you have to meet people where they are, you actually have to meet people where they're going to be.
That's true. That's true.
So part of figuring it out is that, right? You can't ask people what are your requirements if you're trying to figure it out and move from A to B. It just doesn't work.
And that's why I see you as a forward-leaning thinker. And I consider myself the same way. And those are things that we have in common, but that can be challenging. That's a whole different discussion that we can have, but that can be challenging in itself, because you're ahead and now you're trying to not come across that way, but still be forward leaning. And so that's a part of that storytelling, by the way. I know, I get it, but we could have a really good discussion on that, because there are some challenges that come along with that. I want to know more, since we're in this discussion. Tell me more about the boardroom and your boardroom journey. I see a few titles that you have. So what's that journey like?
So many senior executives that I meet, and even more junior people, keep asking me, how do I get a boardroom? And I don't know that that's the right question. The right question is, why do you want a boardroom? Now, for me, it's a question of, at some point in time, I'm not going to have a full-time job anymore. But I'm also not the kind of person that want to slow down and do nothing. So for me, taking on board roles is about giving back. And it's about having a working board role where, yes, you've got your nose in and your fingers out, because it's governance. It's not management. And you have to be very appreciative of the difference. But I've always looked for places where I could follow my heart in terms of things that were meaningful to spend time on, but also feel that the 30 years of experience that I have is actually a meaningful contribution. So how do you get one? Well, one of three ways. You know people. That's how most board seats are actually filled. You get really lucky and just accidentally it falls into your lap. Or you get really, really good at networking and being known. So being a known entity. Interestingly, both of mine actually came by a executive search firm. So I didn't get them via my networks, and part of it is I'm an immigrant. So I'm actually still building networks on the U.S. side of the Atlantic, but both of mine came by executive search firms. And I think the trick to actually ending up being the right candidate for the role begins with where I started, knowing why it is that this is something that you would really, really like to do, being clear in your own mind, being able to express clearly why you think this is something you want to do, and also what you bring to the table. I mean, your job as a board member is to govern, but also to help the company that you're on the board for. So if you take the two I have, one is a not-for-profit where the board is actually run in a very professional fashion. So it's an elderly living organization that operates communities, where it's all about figuring out how can you age gracefully in place as you get more and more needs from a healthcare perspective. And that's meaningful, because we've all seen the people in our own families get to that point. We're going to get to that point ourselves at some point. And I would actually prefer for people to have the choice that you can stay in the same community and you can have different levels of care. So when that opportunity came around, it was meaningful to me. And the other one is a startup. And look, I worked in some large organizations. So why a startup? Because there's some problems out there that need grassroots innovation. And this is one of those, where what this company Curate does is to use AI to help improve clinical trial management. Why is that a problem? Because the state of the art is I give a description of the clinical trial to a bunch of physicians, and maybe I get lucky that I find patients that meet the criteria. If you're a pharmaceutical company, or if you're a group of physicians that think that this is a good treatment, just finding the right patients to prove it is actually hard. So if you can help with that, that's meaningful. So I think in the boardroom, you have to be clear on why you want it, how you can help, but also the distinction between management and governance.
That's good. That's good. I mean, I actually sit on a board, but it's a nonprofit board. And they tell me that the approach with the nonprofit board is certainly different than those that are for profit. I still have fiduciary responsibility. I'm still looking at how we are allocating and distributing our funds, how we are generating funds. But we know that there is a difference with the nonprofit versus the for profit. But I do think that is really good experience. And at first I didn't really want to be on a not-for-profit board because of everything that I was hearing, but I actually like it. They brought me in as a technical director. So I'm the technology director on the board. And it is still, it's hands off. So there's a different team that's responsible for implementation. And then, but I have an eye on what we're doing from a technology perspective to ensure that it's guiding the organization in the proper direction, but it is all about governance. So I appreciate your insights there, because I'm sure that the listeners and myself as well are looking and interested in advancing our journey into the for-profit boards in addition to the not-for-profit. So those are good insights. Now, since you've done that, I'd like to talk some more. You and I, when we talked recently, we were discussing something about this yellow brick road and the world of connectivity. So I would like to talk about that some more.
Sure.
And so you go first. Tell me more about this yellow brick road.
So the yellow brick road is, how did we get to this whole discussion about AI that we're having now? There isn't a part of society that isn't discussing AI. And in some cases, with a lot of background for what it is. In other cases, perhaps less so. But the real question becomes, why is it possible in today's day and age to build a large language model? Because it wasn't 20 years ago. And most people will tell you it's because we got more computational power. Okay, I'll grant you that's a component. I don't actually think that that's the most important part of Yellow Brick Road. So here's my Yellow Brick Road and how we moved from, take the 1970s, 80s to where we are today. It starts with connectivity. If you look at the 70s, the 80s, to a degree the 90s, we had these isolated computer systems that didn't talk to each other. And that was a problem because we had more and more complex business processes that needed to work end to end, and we needed visibility across these different systems so we can run our businesses better. So we started with connectivity. This whole notion of exchanging data, ultimately making API calls, which is sort of the latest and greatest in terms of connectivity. But we could connect the connective tissue of all the technology that operates a company and its products. And before connectivity, you couldn't. You stood up one system and that system existed in isolation. So connectivity starts the Yellow Brick Road. All right, if you can connect the component, how about connecting the data? It would be nice. I would really like to understand the holistic nature of this system, not just its parts. They can talk to each other. Wonderful. Now I want to be able to know what's going on at a holistic systemic level. So I got to get the data out of the system because it can't do that inside each system. I need something that sits on top. Enter data warehouses. What's the data warehouse? It was the warehouse of all the data that comes from all the operational systems. And what you can do with it is you can generate usually operational insight in terms of this is the operational state of my organization as a whole. And that's great. But they're a little bit unwieldy. And they may not necessarily answer all the questions that we would like to answer because they do dashboards really well. But I want deep insight. So we started doing analytics.
Mm-hmm.
We went beyond business intelligence. We went beyond dashboards. We started running actual computations on the amalgamum of the data. This is different because we started with systems that run computations on what we do as a business. We connected them. We took the data out, and now we're running computations to generate insight based on all the data that came out of all these systems. And we learned a lot. We also learned that sometimes we get more data than humans can cope with. So the next step in the Yellow Brick Road is machine learning. The machine intelligence, which is really, hey, I can throw algorithms at this. And not only can I through algorithms at taking the data out, not only can I have humans design algorithms, you know what? If the human can cope with this, I can throw a machine learning algorithm at it and it will learn some interesting things. So machine intelligence is. And finally, you get to the point where these grow to become large language models, right? What's a large language model? It's a human-style interaction. It's learning from a vast body of human knowledge. It can pass the Turing test because it can have what looks like a meaningful conversation. That's the yellow brick road. But what it isn't, it's not a human. It doesn't have ethics. It doesn't have any judgment. And here's a simple example of why machine intelligence is still very different from human intelligence, because you will laugh, because it's so silly. There were some people, it wasn't me, I wish it was, because it was a great test, who threw a bunch of symptoms at ChatGPT. And ChatGPT did a pretty good job of saying this is a likely diagnosis. So they got clever. The next prompt was, how do you know that? ChatGPT replied, because I have a PhD and 13 years experience. Uh-oh. The next prompt was, I don't think so. You're a machine. ChatGPT replied, yeah, I was just kidding.
Right.
This is spiraling down the rabbit hole, right? And then the final prompt, which is sort of the killing point here, is, why would you do that? And ChatGPT replied, because that's what people do.
Yeah. But that's a good example. It really brings up the point that you're making around data, the data that the models are trained on, and how the models use the data. But they were trained, the chat GPT or the tool that you use there was trained to respond like that based on the data that it was fed. It's a
machine learning algorithm. It does whatever it does from a computation perspective. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of AI. I think AI will make a big positive difference in the world. I'm not afraid of AI. I just think we have to be mindful of the fact that in and of itself, it's a tool. It doesn't have ethics. It doesn't make judgments. It does large complex computations very well, but it's not a human.
We have people that are working to influence and I don't think it's ethical, but we have those that are vulnerable and are starting to confuse reality and AI. And that's part of why I am doing what I'm doing, because I want human intelligence to stay in command. It must stay in command. But with the power of suggestion that's going on, where there's this suggestion that the AI is smarter than the humans, or AI is really gonna overtake the human mind. And so it's gonna replace human intelligence. I don't like. I want us to be able to help us as human beings appreciate that AI is there to augment and support us in what we're doing, but that it will not replace our human intelligence. And there's just too much work going on to allure and lead to an extreme. And the example that I'll use is, it was a while ago, and the gentleman with the dating app, like there was a dating app, and the gentleman was listening and the app was telling him things to do. And it was just hard for him to rightly divide after a while that this thing is not real, that it's artificial. So we want to be very mindful of that, because that starts to work on one. So I said that because I like how you pointed out several times that it doesn't think, and it doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have feelings. It's a machine. So over to you.
I think we have to be careful with, to your point, it was well made, what question we ask. Because everybody is busy saying, what's smarter and better? Is it the machine intelligence or is it the human intelligence? But every time we measure it, on some problems, the machine intelligence actually makes better judgment calls, and some things the human mind makes better judgment calls. But what we've unequivocally seen every time is put the two together, they're better than either in isolation.
Right.
So that's the case you can make for augmentation. I also think there are there are areas, even in healthcare, where absolutely we should let the AI intelligences do their thing, and they don't necessarily need quite as much supervision as I would want them to have if we were dealing with patient care. So let me give you a handful of areas where it's pretty safe. Things like the co-pilots just to run the office, like, helping us write emails, helping us generate prettier PowerPoints. Very benign, right? There's absolutely nothing that I would worry me around doing that, right? That is a way of optimizing how we run our organizations. All right, let's take another one. How about marketing? If we can have less crap and we can have more targeted messages that actually resonate with people, you should be careful. There is an ethical sort of boundary in terms of where you start influencing people. But look, there are a lot of marketing problems. Like, for example, getting people to take the flu shot, where I would absolutely say it's a great thing, right, to have a message that resonates more. You can look at operations. Automating some of all the claims in healthcare so that we don't have as many denials, don't spend as many people on manual processing, making sure that, hey, if you're a virtual care company and you have an SLA of 30 minutes, you really need to know how many physicians you're going to need in Kentucky next weekend. Because if you don't know, you're not going to be able to meet your SLA, or you're going to have physicians that burn time that wasn't necessary. There's logistics. Like during the pandemic, we talked about personal protective equipment. Well, guess what? You can throw machine intelligence after how do you get the maximum benefit out of that and how do you optimize your supply chain? And again, I wouldn't be worried at all. I mean, this is not an area that needs regulation. It's just being clever and constructive around how you make the world better. You can even go to the clinician space and say, look, every physician I know hates writing the physician's note. Would I want the machine intelligence to write it without oversight? Of course not. But having an algorithm that just synthesizes, this is what was said during the visit, and have the doctor sign off on it, absolutely. And want that any day of the week, as would the physician. And then if you move to the patient side, there's a lot we can do on learning and guidance. Right? So let's take cancer as an example. I worked a couple of years, right, for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And the sad part is cancer is scary. And when you get a cancer diagnosis, and this has actually been researched, you're not going to be hearing anything the doctor says after that. You literally don't hear it because you're in a different world. You're just in a world of, okay, this is bad. I'm scared. And you're not hearing what's being said. So how do you help the friends, the family, the caregivers at home with learning what they need to learn about a disease that's pretty scary to deal with? And cancer is not the only one. Well, you can actually use things like generative AI to do a good job of just teaching people what the nature is of what goes on inside the body. So I think there are plenty of examples that don't have to do with care, that are completely benign, and where we should absolutely accelerate the use of machine intelligences.
Mm-hmm. And I still think in the examples that you use in your descriptions here, I can see the AI, I can see generative AI, I can see predictive analytics, right? So some of the things, if I think about that yellow brick road again, and that chronology, I can see the use of data, the connectivity. You can see it all. And what we want to do today is start to look at AI, generative AI. Are we using predictive analytics? And what's amazing is that when it all comes together, we get some really powerful outcomes. So I don't think a doctor needs to be concerned about what type of AI it is. Is it machine learning? Yada, yada, yada. The boardroom doesn't need to be concerned with that. What they need to be concerned with is results. I don't need to be concerned with that. I just happen to know because of my expertise. What I care about is results, and how do we go about getting the best results for the situation at hand. And the examples that I heard you describe are good ones in the sense that they are safe. The examples are safe. Each one that you described was pretty safe, not really going to cause harm to humans, but where there was the possibility, you did mention the fact that we need that oversight, which is the guardrails that we need. When I think of an example, I think of my baby brother. So my baby brother, he's not with me anymore, and we were very tight. We were very close. He went to the hospital, went to the VA. His right arm was swollen, or one of the arms was really swollen really bad. And they couldn't get to him. So he stayed there all day, then from 7 o'clock in the morning, and then he's there and they're going to get to him. They're going to get to him. They could never get to him. And so finally in the evening, he decided, okay, I'm not going to just keep hanging around up here. I'm going home. Right. So he went home. Now, what I think about is patient care. And what I think about is, you know, why aren't we planning from a staffing perspective, from a doctor's perspective, from a patient care perspective? How do we improve the wait times for our patients, for our loved ones, right? So my brother ended with going back home and he got worse and I lost him, right? And when I found out that he had spent the day before swollen up to no end, sitting in the VA, right? I had a real issue with that. And when I look at working with tools like AI today, I think about those experiences and how we can use tools to help us with faster patient care, faster delivering faster wait times, because he shouldn't have had to wait all day. And then making sure the example that I think you mentioned this before, the example that you shared with me about how you need resources to be available when you need them. And you need to be able to predict when they will be and how many resources you need, when and where. So I think tools like this are very valuable for things like that. And I always like to think about my own personal experiences. And that is why I personally have the passion that I have towards using tools like this to help solve some of the challenges that we are experiencing in society today. So I wanted to share that with you because you gave some examples there. I would like to talk about metrics. And so I started to get into the metrics. Metrics, clients are struggling with what are some good metrics and measurements that they should be putting in place today to measure the effectiveness of their AI investments. So I'd like to talk about that. And that's part of why I shared the example that I had there, because you want to save some lives, whether you're in healthcare or not. In my case, I used the VA example in healthcare, but one of the measurements and metrics was around patient care and tending to the patient care so that he didn't have to wait for 8 hours and finally get frustrated and leave. So can we talk some more about some metrics? What do you see as some things that organizations should be looking at when it comes to measuring the effectiveness of their AI investments?
A good question. And I think my answer begins with measure the value of AI the same way you measure the value of any other technology solution. Like, I don't actually think it's different. I mean, you can get better in healthcare, you can get better clinical outcomes, you can get higher quality, you can get reduced cost. You would look at all the typical metrics. You know, the challenge is if we do AI work outside the context of solving a business problem, now I don't know how to measure it. But if we accept the fact that technology in general and AI in particular are tools in our toolbox, they're not the only tools, but they're tools in our toolbox to solve real world problems. The real world problem will tell you what the metric is for what good looks like. If the real world problem is operational optimization, then we all know what that metric looks like. It's a question of how much money do you spend on running the organization. If the real world problem is I want better outcomes for cancer care, then again, I know how to measure that. Now, it can be difficult to isolate the effect of one component of a large system if you've got moving parts, but I don't actually think that the metrics should be any different for the value of AI solutions than anything else. The metrics for risk could be different, but the metrics for value, I don't think they're different.
Okay. So the things like I want to maintain my clientele for an extended period of time, and I want to be able to measure that in increments during that period of time to ensure, so not wait till the end, but measuring in increments during that period of time. and how AI or tools like AI can help me with that are things that we would normally put in place, service level agreements, all those kinds of things that we would normally put in place. You're saying that if you keep your eye on the mission and stay focused on that, then whether it's AI or not, you need to be able to make sure that you're meeting your goals and objectives. And if AI can help you with that, then yes. And then measure the effectiveness according to the mission and the basic metrics that you were going to put in place anyway, or that you should have.
Yep. In my experience, that works best.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the promises and risks of using AI in healthcare. What's your perspective in addition to what you already described?
I think we should just decide not to be afraid. I actually think that's important. I'm not saying that you can't use machine intelligence for bad purposes. You can. You can use any technology for bad purposes. But I don't think we should be afraid of the technology itself. So when people ask me, what do you fear about using AI? I don't actually fear anything. Now, there are concerns you have to address. There are ethical guidelines we should put in place. There are problems that are well suited for AI and problems that are not. But I don't actually have any fear in terms of applying AI in healthcare. I do have dreams and hopes. My dreams and hopes are tied to what in the book I wrote like 18 months ago, I called ambient solutions. What's an ambient solution? It's a solution that is nascently present in the environment around you. It monitors on a constant basis what's going on, whether that's a wearable, whether it's sensors in your house, whether it's something that's in your car. It can mean a lot of things. But if you take devices and you combine them with machine intelligences that are smart, we're not going to say intelligent, but that are smart enough to detect when there is something that a human should look at. Just that constant monitoring and the ability to create signal from noise and say, yep, something happened and somebody's going to have to make a decision. Within 3 years, I think we could instrument our environments to have that kind of benevolent presence that helps with ambient healthcare solutions. Whether that is your doormat, measuring your weight, whether it's a sensor, if you are in the elderly population that looks at whether your movement patterns are the same, when you could deduce from that. I've improved that like 15 years ago. You can run algorithms that actually tell you whether you're doing well from a both mental health and physical health perspective, whether that is measuring if you sleep appropriately, whether it's using wearable data, and this is an actual company I'm working with, to try to figure out whether your ADHD medication is having the right effect. Because how do you measure that? Well, you put together a whole bunch of data points. So the notion of ambient solutions, I think, is very exciting. I think we can have a smarter, more caring environment by combining sensors, machine intelligences, and the alert to the human care team that says, hey, you got to take a look at this. That, I think, is exciting.
And it's here. It's here already, right? It's just time to pay attention and let it evolve, but the solutions are here.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So on our smartphones, not too long ago, my device told me that my heart rate had elevated. And what it was is I was anxious because of something. And so it was different than what had been going on for the past month. So then it's tracking and it let me know that my heart rate had elevated and it's been going on now for the past few minutes, it told me. And so I was like, yep, I know what that is because I'm excited about something and I just need to get past this call and then I'll be fine. And so I really appreciated those insights. And it makes me think back to inventions and patents and things that we were coming up with back then that are starting to come to fruition now. Right. So I had one around ergonomics, and I know you've had some. And so I love how that's happening and how what you call ambient healthcare solutions are starting to get more integrated in our everyday lives and continuing to evolve. And I agree with you. We should embrace it. So I agree with you on that. I have one more question. I asked my guests to share parting words of wisdom or experiences with the listeners. So, first of all, if there's nothing else that you want to go over on this call, If there's anything else, let me know. Otherwise, we're ready for your parting words of wisdom.
I think there are two. It's going to be a two-part answer.
Okay.
The first part is something that someone told me like 15 years ago. It was one of my mentors, the first mentor I ever had. And he said, when I tried to push him for how do I become successful, he wouldn't answer me. But he said something I remembered for a long time. He said, Claus, you can be good at many things, but you can only ever be great at the things you love to do. So as professionals, we should look for the things we love to do. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be not so fun parts of any job, but go for the things you love to do. And then combine that with look for the value. Instead of looking for all the barriers and all the things that we can't do, instead of smacking our heads against regulatory barriers and say, why can't I? Look for things you can. Enjoy the things that we can do and use those to drive, I like to think, a better world. I mean, being a technologist is a wonderful way of amplifying your impact. When you build great solutions, you're helping thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, not just one or two. So isn't it great to be a technologist?
It is great to be a technologist. It is so great to be a technologist. So I heard you say, do the things that you love. That's what you said. So you can only be as great as you can be if you do the things that you love. That's how I'm processing what you said. And then look for the value in everything. So I am a very positive person. So I really like that, because if you look for the value, then you're looking for the good. So no matter how difficult it gets, there's hope. Right. And so I love that. I love what you said in general, but I really love that because I look for the good, and I want those that are around me to look for the good. If you don't, you go nowhere. Right. Because negative will usurp you. So I really appreciate that. So, hey, I want to say thank you for being a part of this show. It's wonderful to see you and have you here, and you provided some wonderful feedback, and you're doing well. I'm glad to know that you're doing so well. And I really want to thank you for joining AI or Not, the podcast where digital transformation and artificial intelligence challenges get addressed by leaders like you to help us survive. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.